studies. Now, I shouldn't have to bring any of this up because we should just be able to argue the argument and move on and shouldn't be appealing to authority. You know, appealing to authority is a fallacy, right? Blah, blah, blah. But I know that people listen to experts, so I have to point out that the experts who talk openly, they're the ones who are politically filtered, which is why you need anonymous surveys to figure out what the experts actually think, as opposed to relying on the politically filtered people that like to talk to the press, and that the press likes to talk to. Keep that in mind, that Amy Harmon is going to seek out people with credentials with a certain point of view on any topic. Basically, about a third of relevant experts in the West, 2/3 of relevant experts in the former Soviet Union and Warsaw Pact, and basically 100% of the relevant experts in China have views on the existence of biological races and the heritability of race differences in what we call intelligence that would be described as race realist. Though I'm pretty sure that's not a term they use in China, probably not even in the former Soviet Union. Harmon banks on authority jam-down tactics to push a narrative that is dumb as pig shit. It's Pulitzer Prize-winningly stupid, impossibly stupid. Then, to anyone who doesn't believe it, she calls a white supremacist. If you think Asians, Indians, and Jews have higher IQs than Amerindians and Polynesians, you're a white supremacist, according to Harmon. And as a cherry on top, the Harmon crew here goes on about ye old scientific races from the 1800s. And what's hilarious about this is that in the New York Times itself, they had an article showing that Stephen Jay Gould just shit out the mouth lied about Samuel George Morton. Morton had a collection of skulls from around the world, and he ordered them by size and found that size differences between the races. Stephen Jay Gould, in Mismeasure of Man, claimed Morton got the data wrong, and Gould then quote-unquote corrected this data. And he corrected this data mathematically. Gould didn't go himself remeasure the skulls. He was able to, with a pen and paper, correct Morton's mismeasurements. And Gould's corrections, guess what? They oh so conveniently showed the races to be absolutely identical. The problem for Gould is that the State University of New York actually had Morton's collection of skulls right there. And in 2011, they decided to finally, let's just measure the skulls. Now, that fact alone is a bit disturbing that it took them this long to actually just measure the skulls, do something that simple. But they did in 2011, and they found that no, Morton's measurements were correct, and Gould was a liar and a slanderer. Done. Morton's measurements were right, Gould knowingly lied. Case closed. There's a few hacks floating around on Twitter that like to do all sorts of mathemagic to vindicate Gould. Buddy, it's a fucking volume measurement. It's not rocket science. There's not a whole lot of room for mathemagic to try to vindicate Gould's corrections of this. No, you measure the skulls, you measure the volume of the skulls, the end, done. Morton was right, Gould lied, case closed. Now, the only reason we know that Gould lied about Morton is because we have Morton's skulls. Everyone else's collections were lost, so there's no way to check those. There's no way to check the claims that Gould made about all these other guys mismeasuring skulls. And beyond this, modern measurements, those including those that use MRIs, they vindicate what Morton and all the old scientific racists, quote unquote, were saying. So what are we to say now? Are anthropologists fudging the numbers up to the 2000s? This unbroken chain of everyone who measures skulls all committing fraud? That's what you'd have to believe what Gould is saying. That's what you'd have to believe to imbibe this old scientific racist narrative, that they were all committing fraud and that this fraud is continuing to this day, and the people working the MRIs are also committing fraud. Or maybe this, how about this? Maybe Gould was a fraud, and there's a bunch of politically motivated anthropologists who are repeating what Gould was saying. Now, peppered throughout Harmon's hit job here are these claims that people who recognize divergent evolution in humans are promoting some sort of race ideology. Now, first off, some are, some aren't. There are some people who are literally just kind of pseudo-autistic people who like to categorize things and know about this stuff, and they're mostly apolitical. Full disclosure, I happen to be one of the race ideologues. Fair enough. I'm not a white nationalist. I call myself a first worldist, and I can describe what that is at a later date. But Harmon is also a race ideologue. And again, the difference is that Harmon lies about her agenda. All this race equality stuff, this mania that they have been trying to make the world flat. What does the denial of divergent evolution result in, politically speaking? Well, it results in a kind of racial nationalistic rage, a rape and revenge narrative that tends to motivate all nationalistic excesses. This belief that we were wronged by the country around us, so we have the right to take revenge upon them. That's where you get the atrocities. The atrocities are always motivated by a sense of revenge against people who have done us wrong. The reality is that when you control for IQ, these race differences in economic outcomes not only go away entirely, but in some cases invert. But you have blacks and Hispanics imagining that the cause of their being poorer than whites is a result of various boogeymen sort of lumped into this notion of white privilege. White privilege, a privilege that nobody wants. You got all these people pretending to be Indian, pretending to be black. Nobody wants this privilege. And the very fact that white privilege is sort of an epithet to be used against whites is a piece of evidence itself that white privilege doesn't exist. Basically, the ubiquity of the concept of white privilege is evidence that white privilege doesn't really exist. It's just one piece. It doesn't seal the deal. If white privilege really did exist, you would not expect to see the concept of white privilege so commonly used. White people are the only racial group in the United States that you can legally discriminate against. In hiring, in college applications, in government services, in loans, in terms of their right to form racially exclusive organizations. Everyone can form racially exclusive organizations except whites. And the justification for all these double standards is the belief in oppression. And if you recognize divergent evolution in humans, then all assumptions of oppression-based differences between these racial groups goes out the window, because now all disparities could be genetics. Genetics is placed back on the table and the whole operation is called into question. Now, Amy, what happens when you have a group of people who are being attacked, who are having their communities destroyed through mass immigration that they have no choice in, where it's illegal for them to defend themselves and their communities from Somali invaders who come in, who are discriminated against on the basis of race on all levels, and then they're told that they have privilege and that they are fundamentally rotten for being white? And if they oppose this stuff, if they try to fight back in whatever way they know can, probably not in the most effective or eloquent way, you smear them as alt-right or reactionary or racist or, in this piece, white supremacist. Fire them. Send your establishment attack forces to beat them up. Unperson them. Deny them any voice. You do all this stuff, Amy. What's left for them? What's left for them? What can they do in this situation to counter your bigotry? How do they get you to stop attacking them? To stop you from trying to destroy them? To stop your hate? They can't speak out against you to any effective degree. All the institutions are closed to them. They go onto the internet, they get banned. They try to talk to the news media. Maybe they'll get something on Breitbart, maybe. But that's been cordoned off from the general mainstream media. They don't have the ability to speak out. What's left for them? What's left, Amy? I'm not going to answer that question here. You'll have to answer that to yourself. Alright, it's time to come back. I'm ready to be back, taking a crack at 2 videos a week now. We'll see if I can keep that up. It'll be a bit different now though. Previously, I had a lot of videos that were massively backed up by a lot of prior data that was gathered over previous years, but that has since been exhausted. My YouTube channel has been, in a sense, a harvesting of prior work that I and Sean have done. I then tried to maintain that level of output with that level of data after the prior data had sort of been harvested, which was of course impossible. I can keep up that sort of post-Kraut pace in terms of number of videos, or I can keep up the level of data per video, but I can't do both. So I had to make a choice. Do I keep up the level of data, or do I keep up the volume output? And I've chosen to keep up the volume output. Of course, I'll always be data driven, but it cannot be at the previous level. It just can't. Now, if you like what I'm doing here, please consider donating to my friend who runs the Patreon page cool tapes, he'll make a cool picture, and it seems like he does it every time I put out a video on this channel, but I'm sure that's just a coincidence. But just know that each video I make takes between 12 and 20 hours to make, so just keep that in mind when deciding whether or not you want to donate to this guy, Cool Tapes. Take into consideration how long it takes me to make a video when deciding whether or not all you guys want to give him, $500, $600 per picture he makes. So I'm back, and it looks like alt-right is kind of fading away, and I think we now have a chance to start something from the ground up. Something with a proper formalized platform, a clean slate, a new beginning of the First Worldist era.